Welcome to the Outer Realm with MicheleDerocher and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of the Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does great commission pieces. So tonight I've really been looking forward to, and I know Amelia feels really bad. She's under the weather. You know, 'tis the season. So anyway, she's hating this every minute of it. And I can't blame her because we've just been all hyped up about this. And we're welcoming back our very dear friend and very special guest, Preston Dennett. And of course, keeping with the season, yep, we're going to talk about elves. Last week it was fairies. This week it's elves. And at least it's not gnomes. So I'm starting to wonder if they're just kind of like how similar they actually are. But anyway, with that being said, I am just checking in because some of our locations are having issues. And I think that the Outer Realm Facebook is one of them. So I'll try to look into that a little bit. And Roku, apparently the board shows it being off, but everybody tells me it's on. So it is moving, thank God. So thanks to everybody who's chiming in right now. There's a whole list of you guys. And I know a lot of you are on Preston's page, so thank you for joining us. I'd like to make sure we share them up. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So without further ado, Preston, how are you?
I'm doing good, Michelle. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Looking forward to this. This is going to be a lot of fun, I think. There's so much about these little people, as many of the indigenous people call them. I guess it's just a matter of, which variety. So, fairies, gnomes, elves, there just seems to be similarities within all of the different cultures and such. So, I don't know. Where do you want to start? I always like to jump to aliens or dimensional beings for sure, but I figured, okay, let's just see where you want to take it. And
yeah, well, I certainly find it interesting because they are being reported all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I thought this was something that was kind of relegated to maybe not ancient history, but the 1800s and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of really always thought that, because certainly I looked into the research of, what's his name? Evans Wentz, who wrote all about fairies in Ireland. And
right.
I know it's a big deal in Europe,
yes.
but never really thought there were modern day accounts. I just didn't.
Right.
I never really dove deep into it until I met this guy and did an interview with him for my book, Humanoids and High Strangeness.
Right.
And he described seeing an elf. And that's when, Galen Sharp is his name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I'm like, He actually first wrote me this little write-up of his experience, and it took some while to convince him to do an interview.
Wow. Why? As seeing aliens okay, but elves are just a different thing. Like so.
I don't know. Sometimes people are shy. I get it. People probably go through ridicule a lot, and this was a very personal experience. There were some elements he would not share with me,
Right.
even today. But that's what got me interested, and it got me to do more research. And I was real shocked because I found lots of modern day accounts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly ones from the early 1900s, but all the way up into the 2000s. I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
I had no idea that people are still, to this day, seeing what we call little people. And I think it all depends on where you live as to what you call them.
Right.
Because
and maybe depending on what your background is, because I imagine a lot of people, when they immigrated to this part of the world, a lot of their belief systems came with them, and maybe a few tag-alongs. Well, we people, but I don't know. It's interesting when you say that there are modern day accounts. So why don't we start off with what do we think they are? Are they interdimensional? Are they terrestrial or extraterrestrial beings? There's a lot of strong beliefs that they've always been here.
Yeah,
So
I think so. Having talked to researchers like Joshua Cutchin, who's done a lot of research into that.
yes.
And have read, of course, everything by Jacques Vallée. Who kind of conflates it all together. I don't. I don't think they're ETs. I really don't.
Yeah. I tend, I won't say it didn't cross my mind, because I just look at ET as being just different races that just either, come in dimensionally, or, they're just out of this world, so to speak. But
yeah, I mean, they're flying spacecraft with portholes and little engines to them that burn the ground.
It's this little wee guy. So
it's different.
Do you think they've always just been here?
I do. Yeah, because if you look back historically, you can see accounts reaching back all the way to the Middle Ages, and well before that. People, of course, couldn't really read and write back then, so most of it's lost to history. But there were documentarians, so to speak, who wrote some of this stuff down. Mostly it was like priests and stuff. They were the only ones who could write, and scholars.
That's true. That's true.
Or people who were really well-to-do. But the vast majority of people couldn't read and write, so we've lost almost all of our history of these sort of things. But it's clear they go far back, just like Bigfoot and Sasquatch. But it's so interesting to me because they're little people. These are not giants, walking around.
Yeah.
Every culture, it's little people, and you can call them kobolds. They are in, I forget which country, but often seen in mines and stuff. But elves, dwarves, little people, gnomes, fairies.
Gnomes, of course.
They go by all these different names and go way back. But I think they're probably best termed crypto-terrestrials.
Yes, you're not wrong. Yeah.
I mean, that's the best term I think we have for them. And I think, honestly, they're a lot like Bigfoot in that they are physical beings who can manipulate objects, who do sometimes leave footprints, not always, interestingly enough.
Yes.
But, make noises and interact with people. But then can kind of walk through walls or into a tree. I've got some accounts of that, or into a hole in the ground, or open up like a dimensional doorway, and they go.
So they can manipulate everything around them. Like, they're just not like us common folk.
Yeah, I think, honestly, and I've thought a lot about this because I'm really puzzled about certain aspects of this. Like, their clothes, they're almost always described as wearing brown trousers, leather boots, a belt. They have a little green sort of felt hat, sort of.
It's just it's so typical for what we would expect, right? What we would expect them to look like.
Because I think that's what they do look like, and it's gone down into history that way. So I'm not sure that it's art coming first, and then we're seeing what we're writing. I think it was written down, and then because people are seeing this, but where are these little elf factories?
I know.
Where are they making their clothes?
Where's the cookies? Cobbler elves, where's the cookies? Yeah.
And I'm curious about that, and I suspect that they are. Gosh, I want to do some astral travel now and explore this, because I've gotten
That's
pretty
a
good
big
at that.
thing.
And maybe I'll put that on my list.
Well, there's a certain substance that you could do, which I just don't want to go in and flag us all by saying it. But apparently, if you do it, elves are very common to see.
Really?
You know, I'm just gonna put it
I've
there.
never seen one, out of body, but I suspect that's where they are in kind of the dimension right above ours or adjacent to ours.
Doing things like ayahuasca and things like that, and taking certain supplements that to encourage that sort of a walkabout, I guess I'll call it.
It's a way of dissociating.
Yes. And the common thing that they see are elves.
Amazing. I did not know that.
Yeah. Here, I'll put it in chat for you, right? In quiet. There. It'll be in the private chat.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah. Right there.
Oh,
This is what there was a doctor who did, I guess he was doing a paper on it, or he was doing a study on it. So he interviewed different people, and this is a common thing that they see. So I know someone who recently did it says, I need you to know if you saw any elves. It's like, because I did not see elves. I'm just like, because I wanted to talk about it tonight, but no, apparently it's not a thing. Yeah.
Well, I find it super interesting because, Jacques Vallée certainly has pointed out how they're very similar to ET reports. But if you take a careful look at them, they're different. These little elf-like beings are rarely wearing these one-piece jumpsuits and jumping into very shiny silver UFOs. They're just not. They've got their trousers and their little vests and jackets. And
that's just so cute.
I've got a collection of 20 reports that I thought we could kind of go down in a chronological way.
Yes, let's do it. The stage is yours. I am dying to hear this. I am. So I can't believe there's still modern day reports of this. This is great.
Yeah. When I started looking into this and I did a YouTube on it, got a bunch of people responding. I'm like, I'm so glad you did this, because I don't tell anybody this, but I saw elves and they described these amazing stories that are absolutely recent. Elves are still here, just so people know. They have not gone anywhere. They're just hopping in and out between dimensions.
Wow.
They can do that in a way that's absolutely natural for them.
Yeah.
And I think there are probably little elf villages. I don't mean to laugh, but
people make fairy villages within the forest and stuff. I would not be the least bit surprised if the same applies for these guys.
Yeah. So I think it was probably much more common in the Middle Ages, moving up through the 1800s. Because there's a lot of talk about it, and people would see them in the forest, and it was absolutely 100% socially acceptable to see elves and fairies and gnomes and dwarves.
Which leads me to pose this question. Do you think, now with society being what it is, and we're constantly infringing on these places, these woodlands and such, do you think that we should be seeing less of them? Or do you find that, based on your research and the stories that have been told you, that they're pretty much the same?
No, we're seeing less. No doubt about it.
Makes sense.
And I think it's basically because society is encroaching on the wilderness fairly rapidly. And we're chopping down forests. If you look at the amount of trees from the 1800s to the 1900s, we've lost over half of our forests. So
it's true.
It's a problem. And I think to some extent they're like, well, we're moving on.
Yeah. I can see that.
For sure, but that's what it looks like to me, because we don't have the number of reports we used to have.
Yeah, and pollution as well. I just want to put it out there, Preston. Feel free if there's something you want to address. You have as much control of the board as I do, so please feel free.
All right. Well, let's start with an early account. and we'll bring it up to modern times. All right.
All right. I love it. Let's do it.
I've really looked through the literature at this. I'm like, well, gosh, some of these don't sound like ETs to me.
Mm-hmm.
And some are kind of crossovers and kind of bleed throughs, and it's hard to decide. Some are clearly, no, they're elves. Absolutely. Like the guy I interviewed, who's
right.
who's account I'll get to shortly, because his was in the 40s, actually.
Wow.
Here's a good one from 1931.
Okay.
Fairly recent. I mean, it's less than 100 years ago.
Yes.
And this is from Eslöv, Sweden, which, of course...
You expect to see them in Sweden.
Right. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Ireland, Scotland. That was Elf Central.
Yes, and they were said that they had something like over 15 different races or variations of 50 out in Iceland.
Here's a little statue of a tom-tom, I think is what Dolly called him.
Yeah. Gnomes. I got to send you a video, and you'll understand why I sort of have a bit of a disdain.
Well, some of them can be, they're known. Some of these fairies and gnomes for being a little trickstery, but some are known for being helpful and doing all kinds of helpful things too.
Yes.
So,
yes. Oh gosh.
Of
course you would have a gnome garden. Of course you would. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Here's the first one, which I found in a Swedish magazine, UFO Information.
Okay.
And it comes from a Swedish researcher, Anders Liljegren. And this is an interesting case because it comes from this guy by the name of Helge Eriksson, who was working as a cattle herder on his farm. This is near Eslöv, Sweden. And it's New Year's Eve, actually, January 1931. There's a weird Christmas connection here with some of these. It's really interesting.
Okay.
So he's not far from the farm where he's working, right? When he sees this crowd of little people walking towards him, 10 or 12, looked human, except they came up to his knee. Now, they walked right up to him, right? He saw them from about 150 feet away, 50 meters or so. And they were marching towards him fairly rapidly, but were tiny little men came right up to his knees. Now, this is at night, but it's a moonlit night, and there's snow on the ground, so there's lots of light. And he says they walked right up to a few feet from him and looked normal humans, but were 2 feet tall, maybe 3 feet, but no closer to 2 feet. And they had long beards and were wearing dark green robes and were marching together in 2 rows, talking loudly to each other. Some of them were clapping. And they were talking in a language he could not understand.
Elvish.
I wonder. Yeah.
That's my Lord of the Rings thing. That's my input.
I mean, that's a lot of little people to see. Two rows of 6 beings. And they didn't really pay much attention to him at all. He could see them, so surely they must have been able to see him. But I don't know if we can make that assumption. But they didn't really pay attention to him. But they were walking quickly, easily. But he said, not quite normally. They almost had a weird gliding stance to them, like they were sweeping across the ground in a way that's slightly different than perhaps we would walk. It scared him badly because he's looking at these little guys, but just didn't run. He decided maybe don't run. And he looked real closely at their faces. They were stern. These were not smiling, happy little bearded men. These were very much stern and almost like, how do you put it? Cruel faces.
Wow. Right. Cranky. Yeah. Wow.
Dark.
How oh, okay. All right. Not what you would expect from an elf as it's portrayed in modern day. Like if you're looking at films, right? Usually like white as a driven snow. Yeah.
These were dark in complexion, he said. So maybe these would be probably termed dwarves, maybe? I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't carrying anything, but he could, and this was another weird detail, he could smell them. It was a peculiar odor which he could not place. I think he described it as kind of a chemically odor, which really doesn't give you any clue as to what that might be like. But it's certainly a detail that turns up in accounts. But they
Mm-hmm.
marched right past him into an alleyway that led to the farm where he had just left. And he watched them walk away into this alley. They were not leaving footprints. No footprints.
Mm-hmm.
So that was odd because he could hear them. You know, they were stomping and clapping and talking.
Mm-hmm.
And as they disappear into this alley, there's this extremely intense blue, violet, yellow flash of light. And also, he heard a whining sound, a strange sound. So
Mm-hmm.
this is, what caught my attention because I'm like, well, lights, UFOs is a whining sound. Is that the craft taking off? But he didn't see a craft. He never saw a craft. He said this is what he said. They disappeared into that glow, in that flash. And he heard this whiff of air, and they were gone. So I think they're moving into their, going home to their dimension.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, I've heard experiences from people, that I've worked with over the years and families that I've assisted, that when they hear a portal, and I've heard it myself, there is a sound many times associated with it, depending on the side of it. Sometimes it will sound like a bit of a humming or buzzing or droning. Sometimes people say they'll hear crackling. So if it was anything like that, maybe that's just something to lend to the theory of a sound with a portal of sorts.
Yeah.
Which I always find fascinating because some people have reported different colors with them, different sounds with them.
Well, the flashes of light with Bigfoot disappearing, that happens quite a bit. People disappearing in a flash of light. Yeah, I mean, there's something going on there that I don't know that I would relate this directly to UFOs, because unless you see a craft, how can you say
Right.
that? He
Yes.
actually interpreted it later on as ET. He thought they were or from another world, is how he put it.
Wow.
And he said that their heads were slightly larger than normal too, which is something we kind of see with dwarves, with
Yes.
slightly smaller bodies, as
Yes.
opposed to the standard little people who are perfectly proportioned.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like gnomes, dwarves,
yeah.
trolls.
Now here's another good case. Now this one I found when I was writing UFOs over New York, and it caught my attention. It was in Fate magazine. I love Fate magazine.
It's a good magazine. Yeah, I love it.
I wonder if they're still publishing. I don't know.
I don't know. I've kept all of my old magazines, things like that. I do occasionally go in for some research because you find things in there you just will not find here.
Exactly.
Because if the writers are gone or the things closed down, you're not going to find it all online.
Yep. I've got a whole room filled with magazines.
I love it.
Still trying to organize it, but I'm so blessed because it's a great resource.
Yes.
I love going in there and just start digging. I'm like, okay, well, let's build a study around this subject, which is kind of how this happened.
It is.
So this case is also pretty early, August 1942.
Okay.
And it's a gentleman by the name of Ron Quinn, who got really into elves, as you can imagine, following this encounter he had as a kid, age 10, in upstate New York. And really a beautiful, very natural place up there. And a number of cases are coming from this area, which I find kind of interesting. So this is like in Mongop Valley, which people who talk about it say, oh, it's a magical place. It's really beautiful. And this is east of Monticello. So Ron and his family were on vacation there, and he got in trouble and was told he had to go spend some time inside while everyone else was outside playing. So he was mad about that, and he's just kind of sulking there inside when he hears this tapping noise on the window. And he looks in the direction of this sound and freezes in fear because there's a little man. And he says, very much your typical elf or dwarf. He said it was wearing an odd-looking hat, dark green, had a short, dark gray beard, which covered his lower face. He had silky hair, which went right down to his shoulders, so long hair. Had a gray shirt which fit tightly, but with baggy sleeves. I mean, he
Right.
really memorized all the detail. That's one of the things I like about this account. He's very detailed. Had trousers, which ended right below the knee, and a big, thick black belt, no buckle, dark brown, soft, kind of leather brown boots. But he said what was most striking was he had oversized eyes, very large, kind of roundish, oval eyes. And that's why I included it in the book on UFOs, because people are always like, oh, the eyes, the ETs, they're staring, they're huge. People always remember the eyes of these entities.
That's true.
And he
has owls too, right? This big. Yeah.
So he said these eyes were extremely large. But this little elf dwarf was looking at him with this expression of what he said was, quote, pure friendship and love. Absolute beaming goodwill to him. And even though, he's smiling and looking very happy, Ron, he's 10 years old. You can see this is not a human being, which, as you can imagine, it's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking.
It is. I have to say, if I had something like that just outside my window staring at me, but it does give you a good opportunity to check them out because they're on the other side of the window, which means you could get a lot of detail. Whereas you're kind of face to face, you might kind of go, yeah, like me, nope. Then you regret it after the fact, right? So
well, as long as it's on the outside, because we'll just wait. I've got some other stories where they're not outside.
Okay, good. I'm not the only one.
He looks away, right? Because he's a little scared. He's thinking, okay, I'm imagining things. I'm going to look away. And he's not looking, tap, 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 tap.
Right.
The dwarf will not be ignored.
No, not taking no for an answer.
Right. So he looks back, and of course, it's still there. And he says it's absolutely real. You can see the light on it, the shadows. It's very close. And it starts motioning to him, come closer, come closer. And so he did. He says he walked closely, slowly towards the window and opened it up. And this, so now they're, within a couple of feet of each other.
Yes.
And this guy, this little elf-like, dwarf-like being is looking at him and studying him up and down as if he's never seen a human this close before. He's just looking at him with intense interest, but still very friendly. And he could have reached out and touched this guy, right? He didn't. But he decided he was going to give it a try, actually. So he reached out to touch this elf, and it jumps back and won't let him touch him, which I find interesting because as we go through these accounts, this is something that kind of turns up. I don't know that I have a single case of anybody physically touching one of these guys.
I wonder why. I wonder if it just messes with their chi or their pixie dust or whatever the case may be. That is very interesting. But I mean, I guess you just look at the sheer size of a human being, and then you have this little guy. I wonder if you have a degree of fear. Look, but don't touch, and keep a friendly distance. And
but this was a 10-year-old kid. I mean, what's a 10-year-old kid?
Oh, okay, 10-year-old kid. They'd be close in size then. Okay.
I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think at age 10, you're probably closer to 3 feet. And this guy was, I don't know, he didn't say exactly whether. Yeah. But close to the same size.
Interesting.
So he steps back and he's tilting his head, still kind of looking at him from every angle. And after smiling at him once more, leaps from this little ledge he was on, runs across the yard into the grass with long leaps. And this is something that we do hear a lot with these beings. There's something unusual about the way they walk. And this guy was leaping in a way that almost as if gravity didn't affect him quite normally.
Wow. Okay.
And he watched this little guy run across the yard there and into the forest. So he jumps up, runs outside, and tells his family, I saw an elf. And of course, nobody believes him. And he points to the footprints. There are footprints there. And still did not believe him and teased him mercilessly. But he sticks to his story. He's now, of course, an adult. He's written a book about his experience and other little people.
Mm-hmm.
And
So he's obviously prone to having contact then.
I don't know. This was a one-off, apparently.
Oh, okay. So he's just researched it. I guess that just opened the door to the journey of research as to, where do they come from? And the common question, why me? Like, what is it about me that this little guy felt the need to approach? Because when people who have fairy sightings, that's one of the things that people say to me is like, why would they just come around me? Nobody else
sometimes it's
could see them.
The person is out there and they're perhaps lonely or alone or putting out thoughts of sadness, because that does turn up in some of these cases. They're out there and sort of in a very natural setting, and I don't know. It is a good question.
Yes. Well, yeah, it just kind of makes you wonder, like, does it happen by chance, or again, is it a lineage thing? Some people believe that with fairies that, and I know they're all very similar, but sometimes it just comes from a lineage thing. Maybe came back with a family who migrated here and just stayed. But I don't know. I seem to think that we had a lot out this neck of the woods as well. I think they were pretty worldwide, in my opinion.
Well, I do think that it might be something to do with how developed you are psychically, perhaps, or if you're a contactee, because I have talked to a number of contactees who admit somewhat humbly or, how should I put it, reluctantly, that they have seen elves or fairies. I mean, Dolly actually described seeing a fairy at one point. I know another lady, she's a contactee. She swears up and down she saw this fairy would come into her room, had little wings. I didn't believe her, honestly.
Right. It's like, okay. Right.
I didn't disbelieve her either, because I knew she was a genuine contactee. So maybe there is something to that, to who you are. And
I'm just looking. I'll get to a couple of comments or questions. Do aliens abduct them?
Never heard of it. I've never seen anyone describe, what we would think of as a little person, completely, hat and trousers and soft brown boots. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
This is still a new area of research. And I think, again, there's this tendency for researchers to conflate the two phenomena.
Yes.
Like Jacques Vallée's like, this is the same thing, and it's wearing different masks. It's an intelligence. It's pretending to be aliens. I'm like, well, no, it's not. If you go on the craft, I think you would change your mind. If you saw you guys face to face, I'm not so sure you're going to say these aren't ETs. My opinion, but
no, I would agree with you on that. I think we're not the first kick of the can, right? How many times have you and I even talked about that here? I mean, not the first kick of the can on this planet. Who knows who were here before us? But this is an interesting statement. I met a lady at Contact in the desert that told me about a gnome that her and her husband saw during a snowstorm that waddled across the road. I wanted to make reference to this because I have a video that was sent to me eons ago, which kind of made me kind of go, ooh, I don't know about these gnomes. Because the thing, it waddled, but it did the sidestep thing like this, sideways. It was a straight. I'm going to send it to you. I have it. I'm going to send it to you because it is freaking just bizarre. You just look at this thing and it just stops. And there was from what I understand, there was two variations of the same video. It was taken in Argentina, and the one video, which I have not been able to find again since the first time, the thing kind of looked and scowled, and then bolted. But this other one, it looks like it was just because it's the same group, so it must have just been somebody else taking the video, and they kind of zoomed in on it and got it better, and it looked and it.
Wow,
it's just kind of like.
There's quite a bit of videos out there with this sort of thing, and how you want to interview these witnesses, because I know how easy it is to fake some of this stuff. Especially right now.
Yes.
10 years it wasn't as easy, and 10 years before that it's almost impossible to fake
older videos. Oh yes, yeah, for sure. Those are the ones you want to look for. But I mean, once I think anything hits the internet, it has potential to be mucked around with a little bit, right? So,
But what I
okay.
find interesting is, if you see an elf or a dwarf or a gnome or a fairy, I think you're probably less likely to talk about it than if you'd see an actual ET coming out of a craft, because
Yes.
skepticism against this is, kind of ramped up. Whereas if you see an
Yeah.
ET, it's going the other direction.
Why do you think?
I don't know. I think because perhaps they're less common,
Hmm.
and we use the term fairy tale, and it's just
Yes.
as a
Yeah,
term for saying
but
something that's not
but
true.
it's like little green men. Like that was a term for, throughout the 50s, 60s, like 40s. Oh, little green men from outer space. Now people are like, oh, there's something to this, right? I think it's the same idea. Like I know there was a story, and I think it was Norway or Iceland, somewhere in one of the Scandinavian countries, where they were building a large highway, and there was a
Oh,
tree smack
mm,
in the middle of it. And these gnomes literally sabotage the entire bloody operation, to the point where the municipality or the country just went, go around the tree. And they did. They went around the tree. So now there's this big tree in the middle, old tree, and everything stopped when they just started veering away from the tree.
yeah, I heard about that. I think they chopped it, or somebody chopped it
It was in
down,
the
or
newspaper, this thing. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't know if they dropped it. I think they were going to go right through it, and then everything started going wrong, according to the newspaper article from this country. And when they started going around it, they said, "Okay, we'll go around it," and they started making the preparations to do that, and they could see, okay, that the tree was not going to be in danger. Then they just let things be.
yeah, I heard that story. When I visited Hawaii, we had friends who lived on Maui, off grid,
Yeah.
and they
Yes.
said the native Hawaiians are very
Mhm.
much that way, because
Mhm.
they had all these reports of tractors not working and stuff going
Mhm.
haywire, and they
Yes.
called them Minahunis or something like that.
Yes.
Little
Reminds me
people.
of the movie Fern Gully,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I mean, with just sabotaging everything just to leave the forest alone. But I mean, there are cultures who really strongly believe in all of this stuff. But I mean, these are stories that go back like 6,000 years when you're talking about, like I think some of the first documented older stories. So this is something that's really, deep rooted in some cultures for
yeah,
sure.
but also has this way of kind of being a little elusive in terms of pinning
Yes.
down. I don't know if there's fairy bodies anywhere or elf bodies in
Right.
government custody or anything
Okay,
like
thank
this.
you. Yes, thank you for that. Exactly. I mean, there's gotta be little, I mean, if it is dimensional, then
That,
I could
that's
see
the
them
issue.
coming and
Yeah.
taking their own, right? But what if it's not? I mean, what if they really are here? Then you have these little burial sites
Well, they can
somewhere in the
physically
forest.
manifest, but I don't think that they would,
Yeah.
stay here. This is
Mhm.
why we don't have, any real good solid evidence, is because they're technically very interdimensional. I mean, we
Mhm.
all are. People always ask me,
Yeah.
are ETs interdimensional? I'm like, well, yeah, but so are you.
Mhm.
And there are people, yogis and saints and people who are
Mhm.
spiritual masters who
Mhm.
can levitate, who can walk through
Yes.
walls, who can turn
Yes.
invisible, do
Yes.
things that we consider absolutely interdimensional. I
That
mean, they can do
defy the law of gravity and physics.
100%. Brazil had a medium, Carmine Marabelli, who
Mhm.
displayed his abilities in front of scientists. They had him all tied up. He walked right through the wall, went
Mhm.
levitated, went through the wall. There's a
Mhm.
case in England, a poltergeist haunting, where the girl Janet was levitating over and over, seen by outside witnesses. She went through the wall too. She went from one room to another. And she was just
See?
uncontrolled mediumship, basically.
Mhm.
I think that's what was going on there.
Yeah,
But the
but
point is, we have
still,
this
that
ability.
is crazy to be able to go through the physical like that. But you hear about it in abductions,
Yeah,
right? Where people claim that they're being pulled through a roof or through a window.
exactly. And ETs are walking right through walls. And I'm not so sure this is necessarily what technology as we would think of it. Sometimes,
Mhm.
probably, yeah, if they're lifting
Mhm.
up a beam. But
Yes.
sometimes, no. It's them walking through because they can. You
Yes.
know, but they're
Yes.
still physical. So I think we have to really kind of adjust, our knowledge, or at least try to work towards our belief system and try to put this in somehow, because it's happening. That's the point. And if we're calling it paranormal, it's not because it's defying the laws of the universe, it's because it's defying physics as we know it, underlining that last part.
But they're just advanced enough. Yeah, they already have it figured out. So for us, we're just like, wow, extra sensory, extra terrestrial, right?
So here's the story of Galen Sharp. And this is what sent me on this journey of looking like, wow, elves are real. Okay.
Yes.
It's kind of, I'm like, it's amazing to me, because as a researcher, you want to be able to accept all these stories, but suddenly you find out there were giants on Earth in the past, and you're like, what?
Yes.
How does this happen? I didn't know this.
Yes.
No, okay, elves. We've all heard of elves, but as
yes,
something being absolutely real and still occurring, I did not think that was going on. And that was just me being not a good researcher, me being skeptical. Because I think you really do need to take a look at this, or you're not being scientific. You're not being objective. You're not looking at the evidence.
You have to be, because we don't have all the answers. People are still having experiences with giants. They look at the what was it? The Kandahar giant. Just what was it in Iraq, Iran?
Yeah,
that's U.S. military, right? I mean, that's not that long ago.
Crazy, huh? When you think about it.
Yes.
And
so
giants
why not
are covered up by the
Smithsonian, just dumping bones in the ocean for sure. Right. But we have mounds all over the world, and the United States is no different. There are definitely mounds and old ancient structures and things that are.
There's battle axes that are twice the size of it's taller than a full-grown man.
Yes.
Who's going to lift that up?
Exactly.
It's a decorative item. It doesn't look like it.
Exactly. Exactly. See, right there. So why not little people? Like, look, I mean, they just found a race of hobbit-sized people.
I remember that on that island.
Yes. So
it wasn't too long ago.
I'm sure they're there. So obviously it would be very easy to slip unscathed, uncovered, unless you wanted to be uncovered if you are these little Jews. Yeah. But elves and such can be large as well. Right?
I look at it this way, because people are like, how come there's no Bigfoot bodies? Which actually there probably are.
Yes.
But if they're telepathic,
yes,
they know what you're thinking and can see you coming a mile away, literally.
Well, who's to say, Preston, that their time doesn't move a few seconds faster than ours?
And if you can basically turn invisible, you could walk right by one and you'd never see it.
Well,
how are you going to catch something that is that psychically advanced?
Sure. Or if you just slip into a portal.
Boom.
That's what they sound like. Like portals. That's just what there have been reports, where they're kind of, they'll see something. They know there's a Bigfoot. They're going after it. All of a sudden, footsteps just end, and it's kind of this little sound.
Yeah. Well, there was one guy who shot at a Bigfoot right in front of him, and it disappeared in a flash of light. It's like, I'm out of here. Bye.
Yes, I said little dudes. Sorry. But no, it's true. I think there are so many things about our planet that we are completely clueless about. First off, a lot has been kept from us. First of all, on a need to know basis, we don't necessarily need to know it. But there are people out there who do.
I need to know.
I need to know too, but doesn't mean we apply to the get the info bit. But but there's a lot that we'll never know. And I think maybe some people are just selected to be able to have these experiences, and other people come on it by chance. I always thought
a genetic predisposition. If you're Scandinavian, I've got a lot of Irish blood. I haven't seen anything.
Wow, where's my lucky charms? I want to see my leprechaun.
My grandma was pure Irish.
My great grandmother was half Irish, so I guess it's close. But yeah, I want to see something as well. My jacket after my last experience, nope, not doing it now. My face palm,
So, I don't know. genetics
But
might play a role. I think
yes, I
there's a
think
lot of
so.
stuff going on here, but ultimately, I think a lot of it is geographic.
Hmm.
It's where you're living, and if you're out there in the
Hmm.
woods and stuff, you've got a much
Well,
higher chance.
I
If you're a
think
little
so.
kid, lots of
Yes.
little kids are seeing this stuff.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
always adults.
true because you have this innocence. And I do think if you are living someplace where you are not infringed on, where you don't have literally surveys and houses, you know,
100%. Which
I,
is
I
what happened with Galen Sharp. So it's 1945. He's
perfect.
4 years old. He's a tiny little kid, right? And this
Oh,
is when and he's happy, right? He's got brothers and sisters. He's got friends. He's not a lonely, only child who is, got problems of some kind and needing to have an imaginary friend is the kind of the
hmm
point. No, he had no need for an imaginary friend. He had friends. So,
right.
so he's just in, I think it was the living room. His mom's in the kitchen. It was always when he was alone. It always worked out that way because this
Right.
happened several times.
Hmm.
This little elf-like being walks right out of the bookcase,
Hmm.
about slightly taller than he is at age 4, so very short, normal looking, and not scary or threatening, very friendly. But was wearing
Hmm.
a little jacket, dark square cut pants, worn leather shoes.
Hmm.
He had a normal nose, bald, no cap or anything, just a bald head, large round eyes, moved in a slightly strange way, very quick and deliberate. So
Hmm.
there's another feature that turns up with these little elf-like beings.
Hmm.
So he's absolutely excited because this being starts talking to him and actually gives his name. And this is what Galen would not tell me what the
Hmm.
elf's name was. It was too personal. So
Hmm.
I'm very curious about that because rarely
Yes.
do you hear these kinds of interactions that are fairly extensive. And his was because this being started talking about the wonders of nature, the wonders of the world, the wonders of the universe, very
Hmm.
deep philosophical things that
Hmm.
absolutely astounded him and went largely over his head. He would
Hmm.
later become very philosophical, writing books about duality and
It's interesting that
God,
he had
consciousness.
recollection of that from the age of 4.
Yeah, which is when most people's memory really starts, clicking in.
Hmm.
Is age 4.
Hmm.
That's true for most people, but
Hmm.
contactees generally have much earlier memories.
Hmm.
And let's face it, people have past life memories. So science is
Right.
wrong
Yes.
on memory. You can actually remember all the way down to birth and before.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah,
Yes.
for most people, it's around 4, 3, 4, 5 is when their memory kicks in.
Hmm.
And
So
this was,
that's interesting. So he's giving him, this little child, information that he never ends up sharing. So he knows
well, he
even at
tried.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it was a very short visit. It was very fun. The guy was funny, right? Who
Mm.
just have him rolling in stitches and quickly left through the wall. So he goes running and says, "Mom, I saw an
Yeah.
elf." And his mom's like, "Oh, that's so sweet. You have an
Ah.
imagination." And he
Yes.
doesn't know. He
Mm.
doesn't even know what the word imaginary means at this point. He's like,
Mm.
"Huh, okay, if
Yes.
you want to call it that, that's fine." But it was real to him. It was absolutely real. And he would
Hmm.
later get confirmation that yes, this was real, because
Hmm.
life went on. But a couple of weeks, months later, comes in again. Same thing, jokes around, sort of this conversation that's back and forth, which at that age he doesn't really remember exactly what
Hmm.
is being said.
Hmm.
But this happened 3 or 4 times over this period of age 4 to 5.
Hmm.
And he says one time he was outside and this being started picking up stuff and balancing it on its head and pushing it around. And so he knows it's physical. So, because it was actually manipulating the physical environment.
So this was more than a one-shot thing with him then.
Oh, yeah. That was probably
Okay.
the 3rd or 4th visit.
Right.
And then another time he comes in, and guess what? There's 2 of them. He brought his friend, who was slightly taller. And
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. So 2 for 1, and one is taller. So I wonder if it's an age thing or if it's a variation thing.
I don't know. I couldn't say for sure. They looked very much alike, but not twins by any means, like we sometimes hear with ETs. People are like, "Oh, they looked almost identical." You couldn't tell them apart. But let's face it: when someone looks at someone of a completely different ethnicity, if you're in that ethnicity, you can see the variations in a person's face. But if you're not, they might look very much identical to you, but they're not. They're really not. It's funny, sometimes I'll be watching Big Brother or something, and they put on these beautiful blonde women. I'm like, I can't tell the difference between these two blondes. What's wrong with you?
Yes. Make it stop.
I don't think that they were identical, but they looked similar. And then came horrible news. Valen's family's deciding, this is in Lakewood, Colorado, really beautiful area in the foothills of the Rockies. Very rural. And his family's like, we're moving. And so he's seen these elf-like beings 3, 4, maybe 5 times. And he's really worried about them. He's like, I've got to tell them we're moving so they can come with us.
Oh.
And they appear, about during this moving process. And he immediately tells them, he's like, I'm moving. Will you come with me? And they said, oh, and they got real sad, or the one did, because it was just the one time that there was 2 of them. Said, no, can't go with you. We cannot leave this place.
Oh,
And it
that
broke
would be so difficult. Yeah, that would be hard.
And he
That
moved
would be
off,
hard.
and that was it.
And that was the end of his experiences as well, I take it.
Yep. And I went back and forth with him. I'm like, okay, did you see a UFO? He's like, no. I'm like, do you think these could possibly have been screen memories of ETs? He's like, well, no. I didn't end up on a table. I didn't have any fear. There was none of the, all the little markers that you look for in terms of this being a UFO experience. As an adult, he did see a UFO off in the distance with his wife. He became a tremendous artist. He actually sculpted some of these guys. And I mean, a really talented sculptor and artist and writer.
Wow.
So this absolutely influenced his life in a really profound way. He looks back on it with absolute, precious memories.
Did he ever go back? Kat
No,
is
he
asking.
didn't.
Wow.
Never went back.
Okay.
I would love to go back and talk to the people in that house.
Yeah. Did anybody else? That was going to be my next question. Do you know if anybody else had experiences, like if the family or if this guy may have heard? I guess it's tough. You just leave it and that's the end, and you just chalk it up as a memory and experience, a journey.
Yeah.
So,
It's sad though.
I would have gone back. I don't think I could have that kind of experience and not want to go back and experience it again and see, do they look the same? Are they still in the area? Like there's just so many questions with that.
And I found other cases in that general area.
Okay.
Colorado Mountains area.
Okay.
So maybe this is what I'm thinking geographically is what's probably going on here. There's certain areas where they're more prone to live or enter our dimension. Hard to say for sure. But when I heard his account and I went back and forth, because I really, kind of pushed at him a little hard to make sure that this wasn't a screen memory. Oh gosh, there's elves. Are you telling me there's elves? So that kind of shifted my belief system a little bit. I'm like, I need to research this.
That's tough. That's tough because it's not like there's a whole lot of information out there. And like you say, it's easier. I've always thought it was easier for people to believe in certain things like ghosts, for example, than aliens. But now it seems to be no, we're okay with aliens now or other extraterrestrial or interdimensional races. It's like almost like people have to be eased into it. Some people are very much into fairies and elves and that whole bit of folklore. I mean, to the point where there are fairy gardens. You go to Lilydale, for example, there's an entire forest, right? The fairy forest. It's all geared. Little houses are built and there's just beautifully manicured, anything, fairy gardens. I
Yeah.
mean, some people are just very, very open to it.
There was that whole kind of, well, not a scandal, but definitely a controversial story about the Cottingley fairies, which
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes investigated and absolutely was taken in. Turned out
Yes.
they had cut out little magazines and were faking it. But they insist to the day they died that they actually did see fairies when they were little girls in their garden. They had just put those up because they really wanted to publicize their story,
Mm-hmm.
which is
I
something
could
that
see
does
that.
happen in cases.
Oh,
Word of warning: if you actually see something, don't fake anything because it will pollute your story.
yes, it's true. It's true.
You know?
I was going to say, okay, maybe if they were trying to attract the fairies to come back, but unfortunately, like you say, you have to be pretty, as soon as you try to start fudging things, that's the end, because now this is all that people remember of that story, was the fact that they tried to fudge their,
Yeah.
their
And
story.
there's a long history of cases like that, which kind of became polluted because the
Yes.
wings kind of fell off the line a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Most,
Yes.
I mean, very likely did have genuine experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, word to the wise there.
Yes.
Stick to your guns. Don't make up any evidence.
Don't fudge anything. I wonder if there are large pointy ears that point upward. Is that a fairy versus pointing backwards? Is that an elf? I don't
No,
know.
I'd have to look into
No.
that, but the pointy ears absolutely comes up,
Mm-hmm.
which is fascinating to me because that's sort of your stereotypical.
Yes.
And for that matter, I mean, there are some reports of ETs with sort of big pointy ears. Then
Mm-hmm.
again, I sometimes wonder about some of the witnesses because how reliable are they? And it's easy to pareidolia. That's not a word,
Yes. No,
but
it's true. Pareidolia is huge. Yeah. Yes.
yeah,
Exactly.
pareidolia is a thing. So,
Yes. Mm-hmm. No,
so
for sure.
some of that could be going on here. And a lot of these witnesses are children, but I maintain that children are good witnesses
Mm-hmm.
because they don't overlay a belief system onto what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very good at observation because, as we all know, as we can remember stuff from very young, that really impresses us. Remember
Mm-hmm.
how great Christmas was when we were little, and you can remember the ornaments and the tree and the tinsel
Yes.
because it was just so wondrous and magical.
Yes. So
And
what about, Christmas elves?
yeah, well, I mean, here's a case, right? Christmas,
Okay. Yay.
1957,
Woo-hoo.
Sam
All right.
Gabriel. And
Okay.
this is one I really kind of wonder about because this
Mm-hmm.
kind of shows how a belief system can influence an experience. Because here's this guy, he's 7 years old, and he thought it was an elf. Because this was Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, and it's 2 or 3 a.m. He's lying in bed and wakes up because looking through the window is this short little being. It's
Mm-hmm.
peering into it. He's the smallest little creature. And he's
Mm-hmm.
instantly thinking, well, it's got to be Santa's elves. They're putting presents under the tree for me. He's a little kid, right?
Yes. Yes.
But he was absolutely wide awake. But he says at that point he couldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of paralysis kind of came over him, or whether this is fear or hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
He says, no, I'm awake. This was not sleep paralysis because that's something you might jump to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's looking at this thing as a profile and couldn't really make out the features because it was kind of dark. He can see it's short.
Mm-hmm.
And no fear, just curiosity. And he kind of heard this message like, it's okay, you're fine, go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of leaning towards ET the more, this story goes on. So he goes back to sleep, wakes up the next morning, and of course his sister's going nuts opening presents, and he's not interested in the presents. He runs outside to see if there are footprints.
Ah, smart.
And his parents
Yeah.
are like, what's wrong? He's like, I want to see the elf. I want to see the elf. Going,
Yes.
he would later have experiences with UFOs. So he
Mm-hmm.
probably, he now relates this to UFOs, ETs.
Well, I
But
mean,
at the time, he thought it was an elf. I mean, he really did.
yes. Right. Well, I mean, you're going through the whole sleep paralysis thing. So there's this typical, there's typical things happening there, which can, I mean, let's face it, everything's connected. You get, things that happen during, having an experience with ET is very, very similar to things that have been reported within the paranormal. And again, in this situation here, there's, again, a couple of similarities. So I can see why logically our brain goes to as logic as you can in certain situations. Well, it has to be this because all of this has been going on. But realistically, I don't know. Like it sounds like it could be its own thing, or is it?
I don't know, because there's the whole screen memory phenomenon. And I talked to someone not too long ago who she and her brother saw Santa's sleigh. They would later have UFO stuff, but again,
Okay.
and I talked to a guy who's actually interviewed just recently some people who are describing seeing Santa as well, in a very real way. So,
I have a whole list of horror stories that go with real Santa stories.
oh no!
This month, oh yes, it's going to happen. So I know. So I agree with you. I agree on that.
One thing I think we have to start to consider the possibility of is, we live on this planet and humanity, we know who we are, or at least mostly, but are we the only ones? No. There's Bigfoot. We have dolphins and cetaceans who are really intelligent. Biologists are now finding out that animals are far more sentient than we had any idea of. There's these studies in crows and corvids, they're called, who are teaching their children about the environment. So they will tell you which house you can go to get food and which house not to go to. They will have never been there and the parent will die. And this little baby bird knows because they were taught by their parents and are doing abstract thinking, just levels of intelligence that were far beyond what we considered. There's a very famous case of the most intelligent dog in the world who could pick out, there was 200 toys, I think it was, in the room. It's like, go get the dog, go get the car, go get this dog knew how to do this. This dog was smart. So we have to start to consider the possibility that maybe we're sharing this planet with a lot of other beings, not just one or two.
Just look at the situation with Alex, the African gray, that was university, a bird for university research, and highly intelligent, knew over 400 different words, could do puzzles, could do all kinds of things. I myself had parrots that at Christmas time, they would sing Christmas songs, and any other time of the year it was nursery rhymes and anything else they wanted to sing. But it was interesting because after Alex passed away, I was contacted by his trainer, and she said, I have African grays at my own home, and I want you to know that they've never been in the university, like in the lab over there. They've never been there. And after he passed away, my parrots started saying things and singing songs that only Alex was taught.
Damn. Wow.
So, I thought I was so humbled to be able to receive that story. So I think it's wonderful. But it proves your point exactly. I mean, some of these African grays, for example, have the mentality of a 5-year-old child. I've had many African grays, and they're really intelligent. I've had a lot of different parrots, also very intelligent animals, very intelligent. 100%.
Probably an awareness that far exceeds our own in some ways.
Yes. Well, not corrupted either. We're forced educated into a certain system, and that's the way it goes. That's unless you're private schooled or homeschooled,
right?
You see the differences. So.
Here's another case which is really interesting because it involves two witnesses. I got this close to actually being able to talk to them because their granddaughter contacted me and said, I'll set up an interview, but ultimately it didn't pan out because it's a private, they're very private about it. But at any rate, this was in 1965. This is, where was this? Renton, Washington. And it was early in the morning, these two relatively young teenage girls, age 16 and 13, were going to do some work in a bean field. This is on Russell Road in Renton, Washington. I found the exact location. I love kind of doing the research to the extent that you can. And they were dropped off by their father, and they're walking along this sidewalk towards this field when they see these two figures. Now, mind you, no craft, nothing like this. But as they're not paying too close attention to them because they're just two people. But as they get closer, because they're walking towards each other, they saw these are not human beings. And their first thought, this is August, they're thinking maybe they're in a Halloween costume because they were both kind of short, about 5 feet, but had this very pale skin that was very ruddy to the point, by that I mean you could see their pores. Dressed in gray pants, white shirts, and sleeveless purple vests. Not your average ET attire, right? And a funny little hat, a funny little crooked hat.
Yes.
And really wrinkly, odd-looking skin. And kind of jumping, doink, 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 a little bit. There's that weird movement again. This is one of the things I've come to look for. And their heads were not quite the right shape either, bulbous, and had a strange little instrument in his mouth, like a penny whistle or something, with weird kind of blank, expressionless faces. And so they get right up to them at this point, and they're like, ah! And they run. They ran 50 feet, turned around, they're gone. Nowhere. And there's not really a place they can disappear to easily. So that was curious. And that's, again, points to this sort of interdimensional aspect to these beings.
Yeah, just slip in and out. It's always, again, it's fascinating to me, it's not an area that I have researched heavily, but it's an area where many people who I've crossed paths with, people send me stories all the time, and it's definitely fascinating to think that there's more. I mean, I just always stood the Native American side of things, or ancient civilizations and cultures and that sort of thing. But trying to get perspective into modern times with a lot of these experiences, you don't hear so much about elves and gnomes. I hear more about fairy sightings. That seems to be a really big one. So I just don't know if, you're looking at apples and oranges, or you're just sort of dealing everything within the same cart.
I don't know, because there's some cases that have this weird bleed through, with like gnome-like beings inside. Well, here's a good example. This is a case I actually just looked into fairly recently, which I like because it's 7 witnesses. Again, all children, age 10 and 11. And this is in the UK, in Studham Common. This is in Bedfordshire, England. January 28, 1967. It's a school day. They're out playing recess in this field, which is known for having, I think it's mica deposits, some quartz there, which may or may not be a factor here. It's right next to the Whipsnade Zoo. And it's this quaint little school, primary school. And one of the kids sees this little blue man and quickly points to his buddy, like, look. And they all say, look, look, look. And so they're all looking at this little blue man about 150 feet away or so. He's short. He's about their size and has a kind of tall hat on, maybe a helmet. They couldn't quite tell for sure, but had a beard. The beard comes up a lot in these cases, which is forked and going down on either side of his chest. So this is what's making me think, okay, this is leaning towards this elf dwarf kind of being, and wearing kind of dark gray blue clothes that had a little bit of a glowing quality to it, a belt which was kind of hanging off with a little buckle or box on it, and kind of standing there motionless, looking at them, staring at them. So they're little kids. What are they going to do? As you might guess, they run towards it. En masse, coming towards this thing. And as they get to about 50 feet, it lets out this stream of yellow-blue mist. Now, there's some who thought it might be coming from this little box on its waist, but it sort of enveloped this being, and it was gone. Boing. Disappeared. And they were asked, did it run away? And like, no, didn't look like it ran away. But they're crisscrossing the area now, trying to find it. And boom, it's over there on the other side of the field, looking at them again. Still not moving. Its arms are by its side. So they go running towards it again. Disappears, reappears somewhere else.
Yes.
So this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. Again, it's a sort of like the Bigfoot thing, like how they just bounce around. Yeah, which, I mean, if you RV them, if you RV them, you can definitely see exactly what they're doing. I got to leave that right there. So, got to leave that right there. But, there's definitely, there's something to all of that, of course. But again, I go back to, are they maybe moving a few seconds ahead of us, which allows, our own timeline, which allows them to move and hide a little faster. There are some people.
Maybe there's something to that, because if you do astral projection, right, and you go to the other side, time is a little different there. It moves faster in a weird way. And you can kind of access the past and the future in a weird, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's different. So I think there's something to that it's eluding my understanding. I don't really understand it.
No, but I agree, because if you talk to people who have died and come back, for example, they'll tell you that time, seems to have sped up for them when they come back. There is this time difference, and that they've been told, no, time moves much faster here, because comments have been made, for example, oh, well, we'll see you soon. It'll just be, what might be years for you may only be, days or weeks for us. So
because if you talk to mediums, they talk really fast. Contactees do.
Yes.
And the spirits are talking at really high speed to them.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of interesting as well.
It would make sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
There's a case of God, I wish I could remember his name. He's one of my favorite out-of-body guys from the 1800s, who was out of body and flipped up the mattress and then went back to his body and was laying there, and then the mattress went up.
Oh, crazy.
There was a delay. He did that a couple of times. He was able to manipulate the environment, but it was a delay that was going on there. So there's that same sort of
something to that. Yeah, there's definitely something to that.
So with these little boys in Studham Common,
yes, maybe
disappears, reappears a fourth time. At this point, they can hear voices. It's talking to someone else, and this time they're like, you know what? We're not running forward after this thing. They drew it. You can see it. It's this kind of glowing little blue man with a little hat on it, little round eyes, and they actually put together a whole book, which was lost to posterity, unfortunately.
Oh, it figures. It figures.
Somewhere. Someone has it.
Oh, for sure. If you just think about how many, with anything, you just look at a lot of these libraries throughout the world, some of these really extensive private libraries have all kinds of interesting books, without even getting into institutions and such. But, there's, look at yourself, for example. You probably have quite a treasure trove in there. People are like, oh, I've never seen this book, Preston. Goes, I have it.
I was looking at some of my books. And I'm looking, I type them up on Amazon. I'm like, oh, wow, this one's worth $200. I got it for $5. Like,
yeah, exactly. Because you can't get them anymore. I've paid handsomely for books that were recommended to me, by other researchers or guests that are going back to the 50s, 40s, 60s. And you're just like, oh, okay, shouldn't be hard to find. Who's going to want to buy something? You understand the antique books. You start getting into that sort of era. You think that they're a dime a dozen. They're really not. Nope. Some of them are very, very expensive.
One of my own books is a collector's item. Couldn't believe it. Because someone's like, where can I get, I think it's UFOs over Topanga. I'm like, you should be able to get it online. Like, it's $50. I'm like, you're kidding. And it's going up from there. I'm going to reissue it because
I was
got the
going to
rights
say, you
back.
need to reissue it to drive it down. Yeah, that's
I
insane.
just haven't had the time, but I actually got the rights back from the publisher, so it's mine.
Good.
I can
Then
figure
that's
out a
what
way
you
to
need
get
to
that out
do.
there.
You'll have a lot of happy fans if you do that.
Yeah.
So, because that gets really crazy.
So moving along in time,
Please.
oh gosh, we're going to run out of time. I'm not going to get to all the. Well, let me
Still-
just skip ahead to a good one because someone wrote me after I was doing this research. I'm so glad you talked about this because my friend had this experience. So this is a secondhand, but he woke up and there was this little elf-like being playing with his toys. And picked up the Matchbox car and was kind of looking at it. So he sits up in bed, astonished because this is a dwarf. This is an elf. And the same kind of description you hear with the little vest and the brown boots. Very consistent. They have their fashion sense. They know what they like.
Yes.
And sees that he's being observed. This elf does. Absolutely gets this expression of surprise and dashes right through the wall, and the little Matchbox car hits the wall really hard, falls to the ground, and spins. Which is the kind of detail that you can't make this stuff up.
No.
So it was kind of pointed again to that interdimensionality. It was just an interesting little story. I'd love to talk to the witness firsthand, but it was a modern case. So, but here's another one.
Do you think it could be psychokinesis, or do you think this thing just seriously just appear and that was it? Like a projection of energy?
Dimension, or went through the wall and wherever it could go, and it couldn't take the little car with it.
Right. So
objects can't be pulled into the other dimension because you see this all the time. There was this one lady who kept finding sequins all over her house. And turned out there was a ballerina or something who lived there previously. I had this in my house in Reseda. I kept finding tennis balls in the yard. This is a tiny little yard. There's no way. Well, it must be the neighbors.
Yes.
But then I would go out there. I'm like, oh shoot! There's an old lady who lives here. It's a narrow little hole. There's no way anyone can. How did this tennis ball get here? So I went to the other lady on the other side. I'm like, you know what? I'm finding tennis balls in my yard. And she said, really? She said, did you know that there were tennis courts there? I'm like, really? She's like, oh yeah, before your house was put there, they used to be tennis courts. And I instantly flashed to this weird theory I have of what happens to socks in the dryer.
Yeah.
They're being tumbled around and they're
going to show up in somebody else's house. Yes.
And there's that scene in The Witches of Eastwick, where the tennis scene. Where I think that sometimes people are playing tennis and boom, it hits a certain angle and it disappears.
And that's it. Yes.
We had this playing cards once, with my family. The 8 of hearts dropped to the ground and boink, gone. We never did find it. It was missing.
Didn't they do that with? Did they not do that with the Philip experiment? Or the school experiment, the same idea where they were able to manifest something.
Yep.
I mean, that was,
Rapports is what it's called. This is a thing.
Yes. Yes.
So it's very, like one guy I interviewed who had a ghost in his house. He got in a big fight with his best friend because this ghost was kind of a mean ghost.
Yes.
It was trickstery. Because you stole my guitar pick. He's like, no, I didn't. He's like, I just bought it. It's brand new. I have this thing. You took it. He's like, no, I didn't take it. And it was months later, he's unpacking the garage, the dishes in the garage. These are boxes that are taped up. Open it up, open it, there's the guitar pick wrapped up in paper. How did it get in there? It's impossible. No way.
It is. But it just defies everything, and yet it's happening. There's so many things beyond our comprehension. So, okay, what's next? I'm going to forego the Folgers. Sorry, everybody. I want to make time for Preston stories.
All right. We love Folgers. We'll just say that.
We do. We do. We love Folgers, and we love United Public Radio. And thank you, Folgers. I'll give you an extra big one at the end of the show, I promise.
All right. So here is the next case, which is really interesting. This is in Appleby, Texas. It's 30 acres of woods, lots of hills. It's October 1976, 6 a.m. And the witness steps out alone to burn some trash, and there is this strange little being sitting on her garden bench.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very tall, kind of strong-looking being, solid pale gray, but it has wings. This thing has wings, solid black eyes, no pupil,
Mm-hmm.
and appeared to be genderless. Couldn't tell whether this was a man or a woman, but it was moving its head around him. Quick snaps. And here's this weird movement we see. So it kind of reminded her almost of a bird. And this is what we see with some of these fairy gnome dwarf accounts. They move a little bit different. Long, white, straight hair. I love these stories because they're very detailed. And if someone's making it up, they're pretty imaginative. But what you start to see is this real consistency of reports.
Mm-hmm. Do you find, just off topic for a quick, well, not really off topic, but do you find because of so much media depicting all of these different variations of I would call them, magical creatures, because this is how they label them. I don't even like saying the word creature because they're all different beings. But I think people get within our perception as to what they're supposed to look like. So this is what we assume they're going to look like. Could we be manifesting some of this? Because they will, like even some ET can do. Or if in paranormal, on the flip side of that, same idea. They can project to you how they want you to see them. Are they really what we think and we see, or has that just screwed up what our perception really should be?
I think we have to keep open the possibility until we know, because until we know, we don't know.
Right.
But these reports are so consistent. I tend to lean towards, that most of these people are describing something that is being accurately perceived.
Yes.
Not always.
Yes.
Because certainly there is pareidolia. There is some element of people overlaying their own belief system onto what they're looking at. There is an element of a being saying, you know what? I am going to disguise my appearance. We know rays can do this.
Yes.
I've got enough cases of that happening where I'm like, well, okay. So people will see what they think is a normal person, and it's not. So yeah, we have to consider that as a possibility. But with the huge number of reports of people describing the same thing, I don't know that I don't think we're manifesting it. Because if that were true, we would have a lot more manifestations of things that people really thought a lot about.
Oh, sure. I see it. I see it all the time, and working with some people, but not to that degree. I think it's easier.
We would have an absolute menagerie of beings. It would be insane. It would be complete chaos.
Well, that's what I mean. Like if you're coming into contact with one and they're because they know your thoughts. Most of them are telepathic, saying, "Oh, this is what you think we should look like." Then yes, okay. It's just it's fascinating because there's such a different array of what they look like, as much as there are similarities as well. The ones that, when I look at the similarities, those are the ones that interest me the most, because, especially with the little children, because they haven't been exposed to all of that media yet.
100%. Yeah, the similarities and the differences are, I think, have a lot to teach us on both sides.
Yes.
Look at it. These are striking similarities from people who don't know each other. Here's one with some unique elements to it. Why? Why is this? Why are they all slightly different? Because it's very rare people will see an exact same thing. You know what I mean?
For sure. Absolutely.
So this lady is seeing this being on this bench, right? And it's snapping its head around. It's got long, straight hair down to the middle of its back, ears pointed backwards, she said. And it opens its mouth because it sees her. And it's not saying where, it's coming out like hums, these weird humming noises, almost singing, a sing-song kind of humming noise. And she almost seemed to smile at her, couldn't be sure, but it disappears in this blaze of absolute bright white light that was like an arc welder, so bright you can't look at it.
Yeah, we can see you. Yes, I agree. Sorry, Rumble, from what I understand, is it's freezing here and there. The comments are coming through, So no worries. Hopefully it's just a little glitch. So we can carry on.
So yeah,
Oh,
so
actually,
this
yeah.
light comes on and she said she could feel it. It was actually hot and it left a burn spot on the bench,
Mm-hmm.
which I wish, I'd like to see a photograph of that. And that's because that
Mm-hmm.
would be, quote, landing trace evidence from an elf or fairy. So
Mm-hmm.
that would have been very cool.
That would have been very cool. I would love to see something like that. A quick question. Have you ever seen elves yourself, or do you just research them? Where does the interest come from?
I have not seen them. I would love to. I grew up in a place where I darn well should have, because there's
Right.
magical little glades and creeks and
Mm-hmm.
absolute just beautiful nature that was quite isolated. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
were places where I grew up that people really hadn't been.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a good spot for it. Nope,
Mm-hmm.
never saw them. Just started researching it because it started bleeding into my UFO research. And
Yeah.
you have to follow the evidence where it takes you. You have to follow the stories where they're
Mm-hmm.
leading.
Well, people gravitate to you as well with stories. You're just that kind of guy.
Yeah,
Everybody
well, I
loves
think
to tell you the
you
stories.
know, uh, I've got a real blessing with that
Yes,
because I think
you
people
do.
know that I will endeavor to be absolutely objective and
Mm-hmm.
not twist their story, not push a
Mm-hmm.
narrative. I've had people
No,
say, "Oh,
but you're very kind as well in how you deliver the information, or you're very kind as you
oh,
accept it, even within your interviews. You are.
well, thank you." Yeah,
You're welcome. You are.
I appreciate that.
It's not because
Yeah,
like because I know you or anything, but so
but it's funny. I
you
have
are.
people say, "Oh, all you talk about is friendly ETs." I'm like, "Well, hold on a
Yes.
second. Have you looked at my research? Have you read my books? Some of these
Right.
people are scared half to death, but
Yes.
I definitely help them through it." And I
Mm-hmm.
think for the most part, ETs aren't here to hurt people. I mean, this is
Mm-hmm.
what my research is. I mean, for the most part, I don't think they are here to hurt people.
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
lot going on. I don't want to get too much into the ETs, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. The point is, I'm not pushing a narrative. I'm really not.
No.
I'm trying so hard to be objective, and it's hard
No.
when people start saying,
Exactly.
"Oh, I'm seeing elves."
Yes.
Okay, like wow, this is awesome. Tell me about your elf encounter, because
Yes.
you have to, respect the witness and their story and their
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of their story, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And if they think it's a demonic creature, well, tell me why you
Mm-hmm.
think that. Let's dig down into this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's, first let's make sure you're okay. That's my
Yes.
first,
Yes.
priority. It's like,
But people know this, I think, when they start dealing with you. You have a huge degree of compassion and understanding, and you listen. You're very biased and you're very open minded. And I think that's why people will gravitate to you. They know that if you don't believe them, you're not going to just come out and say, I don't believe it. You're going to approach it with a lot of tact, and you will research it and get the information for yourself, which is exactly what you should be doing.
yeah, exactly. I wish all researchers were this way, and the good ones are. And there's a lot of them out there.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah.
blessed, to be in
Yeah.
this field and have people come to me because the
Yeah.
honor is mine. I am absolutely like, wow, thank you so much.
It's true. You are exactly like that, and that's exactly how you should be. I've always said it even in my own field of work. It's like, "Thank you for entrusting yourself to me," and in your case, thank you for, entrusting your stories to me. Like, I mean, this is just you tell the story, people know you will tell the story, and you will do right by them, and you will whether there's a lot there or not, you still find a way to present it and share it. So if other people experiencing the same thing, they know you're the person that they could come to with that, right?
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's not because I know you or anything, but so
Okay, well, let's move forward
yeah.
in time. I love this case because this
Okay.
one is another multiple witness case. And those are special because it's any person can make up a story. If
Yes.
we have two people who don't know each other in the same area seeing the same thing, it's like, oh, there's something to this. And
Yes.
this guy has witnesses who absolutely vouch for him. His name is Tonley Barefoot. an unusual name. And it was October 12, 1976, in this little town, Dunn, North Carolina.
Hmm.
And he's 8 years old. It's 5 p.m. He's out playing in the field next to his home. I know exactly where this is. It's the intersections of Jonesboro Road and Hodges Chapel Road. You can look this up on Google. And looking a short distance away in the field, he sees a little man. He says about the size of a Coke bottle, watching him with an open mouth in astonishment. This being has a mustache, a blue shirt, a little kind of pretty white tie, trousers that look a little bit shiny, a black, almost German-looking cap, he said, with sort of an emblem on it, dark black boots, and suddenly notices that he is being observed by this little boy and lets out a squeal like a mouse and runs back into the corn stalks. And
Wow.
only saw him for less than a minute, but got a good look at him, not that far away. Tiny little man, a foot tall. That's not big,
No. That seems to be almost like tiny fairy size. Like that's not that doesn't even seem like the standard ones. I know. That's wiki for so little.
So this is more, I don't know. It is what it is. So he runs and tells his mom, and his mom doesn't believe him. There's other family members. No one believes. He goes to he cries all night. He's upset. Nobody believes him, and he's telling the truth. The next day, they're like, okay, show us where you saw the little man. They found all these footprints, all these little footprints in this field. So tiny footprints. They were 2 1/4 inches long. They measured off into the corn stalks where they disappeared. So that is where it kind of stayed for a while. And
for a while, so you say it comes back.
Now passed on, but his niece said she's heard this story many times. He's always said it with kind of tears in his eyes. It's very special to him. Absolutely real. She totally believes him. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because 2 weeks later, and 3 miles away, there's another sighting. At 6:20 in the morning, this is October 25th, 20-year-old Shirley Ann McCrimmon. She lives on the 800 block of Hartnett Street. You can actually see how close this is to where Tonley was. And she's coming home late at, real late at 6:20 in the morning. She's been at a party. And she goes into her house and is about to close the door when she hears this strange noise outside. So she looks outside and she can see something moving in the bushes. And looking out, she sees a little man, 1 foot tall, light brown skin, wearing a thin garment. She's really not sure. Boots. She did see the boots. And it had a little light and shone this tiny little yellow light into her eyes. She lets out a scream and it runs away around the side of her house. Her dogs start barking, going crazy. Later, in the morning, goes out there with her neighbor and they find a footprint. She covers it with a little plastic bowl to protect it and calls a reporter and the police.
Boy. Boy.
So they're walking up to the bowl and there's a little kid there and he takes the bowl and he brushes it right across the footprint. Destroying it.
I was going to say, I thought maybe the little guy would have just brushed that off themselves, to get rid of that evidence. Very interesting.
But I like the case because, these are real people. I looked them up. I looked up the locations. This is all, when you can find the person, when you can find the location. And, this lends credence to the story.
It does. No, it absolutely does. I love the stories. And when they come from children, I think too many people shrug off when a child tells a story. They put it off as imaginary. They put it off as, okay, you're just watching too much television. They don't really take into account that, yes, of course, like any child could be the teller of tall tales, so can most adults. But I think it comes from a place of just honesty and purity, when they're telling you about these experiences.
Yeah. I mean,
and you're hearing them Yeah.
Played all night.
Mhm.
How upsetting
Yes.
must that be when you see something that's so extraordinary, and
Mhm.
then you have to go, because UFO witnesses go through this too. You have the
Mhm.
whole, oh my God, encounter, and then you try to tell
Mhm.
people, and they're like, get away from me. You're a liar. So there's
Mhm.
a double trauma there,
Yes,
which
which
is
would keep them from. I mean, I think we as parents, can scar a child very easily by just saying, "I don't believe you," or "Okay, it's imaginary," or, like we're the ones that they should be able to come to with their stories. But it's interesting because you're also getting these stories, some of the older ones that you've talked about tonight, now they're adults. Can you imagine what it would have been like to hear the story right from the child, when they were children, how much more detail maybe, or just really touching on the feelings that they would have been experiencing at that moment.
yeah, and we're hearing new stories right in the chat tonight. The guy who said, I saw it earlier,
Yeah.
saw little footprints in the snow. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And this is
Yes.
relatively modern accounts. Here's one
Mhm.
from 1986,
Mhm.
Walsenburg, Santa Clara County, Colorado again. Colorado comes up. This is
Mhm.
an adult. A man is digging out a tree, and
Mhm.
he sees this little man, which he estimates is 9
Mhm.
inches tall, 20 feet away from
Again.
him, and it's looking at him, and he's looking at it. So he's not going to
Mhm.
move. The little
Mhm.
guy's not moving, and this went on for several minutes. And it
Yes.
was dressed in a one-piece brown garment that appeared to be made out of leather,
Mhm.
loose ankle-length footgear, and what he called a Robin Hood type cone hat. This is
Mhm.
so interesting to me.
Yes.
It's almost cliche, but
Yes.
this is what
It's true.
he's seeing.
It's true.
He was standing right beneath the pinyon tree.
Mhm.
So, and he watched this
Mhm.
little man for 10 minutes until, he called out to someone else, at which point this little man ran faster than a rabbit.
Mhm.
So there's that movement again. These things can move like nobody's
Mhm.
business.
And they don't seem to, for the most part, like to be seen or interacted with unless it's on their terms. Because the one theme is of all of this is once they get noticed with a great deal of these stories is that they just tend to highlight or hightail it and then go off a distance and watch from a distance themselves,
I've got
unless they
a few more stories. I want to get to this one
do it. Go.
because
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want
We
to
have
jump
time.
ahead because
No, we have time. Go crazy. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Because here's another good one from Christopher O'Brien.
Okay.
R.I.P. Rest in peace. He just passed away. A real good guy.
Mhm.
So
Oh.
shout out to Christopher O'Brien. We love you.
Yes,
Um,
yes. That's yeah. That's
very
sad.
sad
It is.
people leave this field, but very cool. We're keeping his memory alive.
Yes.
And I adore him because he's a very thorough researcher, not one to jump to conclusions, and
Mhm.
always tries to find the logical answer, which is
Mhm.
important.
It is.
Uh,
It is.
so,
Yeah, that was a great loss to the industry.
yeah, truly. And this is a pretty recent case, relatively September 6th, 1989, Rock
Mhm.
Creek Canyon, Colorado. Colorado's amazing. It's,
Mhm.
it's one of my favorite
Se
states. It's so beautiful.
It
It's,
seems to have a lot going on, but it's also very vast. It's not overpopulated like many states. For
yeah,
example, California, which people gravitate to.
yeah, it's pretty high altitude. It's got the Rocky Mountains. It's vast tracts of wilderness that people
Mhm.
can't really touch easily.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
we know the guy. His name is Juan Maestas. He's a hunter, and he's stalking a herd of elk out in the
Mm.
wilderness.
Mhm.
He hears a twig snap. That's not him. So
Mhm.
he hears something and looks to his left and sees what he called a fat, ugly little guy, 3 feet tall.
They're getting smaller, but a little wider. Okay.
Who turned at the same instant he stepped on the twig and looked at him.
Wow.
50 feet away, standing next to a pine tree. So they lock eyes, right? And he's got this very wrinkled face, clean shaven, pink skin, wearing sort of green overalls with suspenders, by the way. A
Oh.
flat topped, floppy hat, red hair sticking out from underneath his cap, eyes that seemed
Mhm.
red and bloodshot. He's close enough to see, his eyes,
Mhm.
and actually gave Juan a little smile and darted behind the trees.
Hmm.
Uh, What's so interesting about this is, Christopher O'Brien is investigating this and got another report 2 weeks earlier, very close to this same location, from a family of 5 people on a picnic who described seeing pretty much the same entity, dressed in green overalls and a hat. They didn't see it as close up. So when I hear this, I keep going back to that question. Where's this little factory where they're making these overalls? How are they stitched? Who's making these overalls?
I know. Takes me back to the Keebler elves. I'm telling you. Where are the cookies? I know. That's, I think, the most fascinating part. I know even through remote viewing, and I've got many friends who do, they have been spotted. They have been seen in different areas. Adirondacks. People should maybe go look out in the Adirondacks. There's been a lot of sightings there.
Yeah, I suspect they're pretty much anywhere. I mean, if they can come into your room,
yes,
they could probably. Yes. I wouldn't surprise me a bit if someone saw one in the heart of New York City. It honestly would not surprise me. I don't have one.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think you're getting in again, so overpopulated. If you have them and they want to be seen, I guess you'd be in a good spot. But, New York State is beautiful, vast forests and so on, kind of infringes up into like southern Canada. So maybe people.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how, yes, the Earth has got, 8 or 9 billion people on it. But we're all clustered in cities. We're all clustered around lakes and rivers and shorelines. There are vast tracts of wilderness in pretty much every state in the U.S. Canada is all about the wilderness. Let's face it.
I know. We definitely have a lot of them. Yes.
America, it's got the Andes mountain ranges. I mean, there's an enormous amount of, untamed wilderness out there.
Yes.
So it's no surprise that there are beings out there that we haven't fully identified or accepted into mainstream science. And mainstream science, is somewhat of a closed system, because if it doesn't fit the paradigm, it gets rejected. It starts to get really hard to get new evidence in that doesn't fit the paradigm or the accepted, this is real
narrative. Yes. It was like that, I think, even in television. And after spending, 2 decades in television, I could tell you everybody follows a formula. So when stories come forward, they're not interested in anything that doesn't fall under that narrative. And when the formula changes, then they'll accept things that are outside of the norm. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not a search for truth; it's a search for money. An audience, which is advertising, which is money. It's money.
Exactly. It's a vicious circle. It is. It's a vicious circle. So absolutely.
Now we're moving along to some real modern accounts. 1997. Okay. This is the Mexico area. I like this one.
Okay.
Summer of 1997, 5:30 a.m. The witness is anonymous. Decides to go outside with a cup of coffee to, sip it on the picnic table in her backyard with her Chihuahua, Bella.
Oh, I had a Chihuahua named Bella.
Oh, really?
Yes.
There you go. So she's sees something and she's thinking, gosh, did her neighbor get a dog? She sees, this little movement in the yard, and taking a better look, she's like, no, this is not a dog. This is a little man. And her Chihuahua, Bella, goes running up to the fence also because the dog sees this too. Yes. And dogs are insatiably curious.
Yes. Oh, yes. And Chihuahuas have this Napoleon syndrome too. So
they're adorable.
Impressive. Yes.
As long as they're behind the window or something.
Yes, exactly. I still have 3. I vouch for that. Yes.
So she takes a look at this being, this little man, and he's wearing a gray woolen shirt, no buttons, gray pants being held up by a rope for a belt, brown boots that look almost like socks, and the dog freaks out. Bella runs away. Bella's not happy, goes inside under the bed and hides.
Oh.
So she's looking at this little man who's not walking normal. He walks dunk, 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 in a wobbly fashion.
Yes.
And goes right up to a China berry tree. I looked up what a China berry tree is. They're beautiful trees. and walks into the tree, into the trunk, disappears, which I thought was
Okay.
fascinating because there's a tradition of, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
No,
so
you're yeah, different cultures when it comes to these little guys, for sure. So Keebler, I was just saying. So, I don't know. Yeah, well, I mean, we don't know. I mean, go back to that whole story in Norway with the construction going through the tree and they're
exactly.
protecting the tree. So there's there's a whole root system. How many? I truly believe that in some of the films that we watch, they leave little hints. Like they know more about what's going on. And some of these filmmakers, this is their way of putting it out there. And
Yeah,
there's
sort of beating the formula.
yes,
You know what I
exactly,
mean? Fighting against it. It's
exactly.
very clever.
But
I've noticed that
yes,
too.
but the trees are always pertinent and tend to be, the homesteads. So it's interesting that the story shows that as well. I like that.
Yeah. Now here's the story that I really wanted to talk about because this one has some elements to it. I'm like,
Okay,
okay,
let's
this
do
one I
it.
have to think about. This
Uh-oh.
is the summer of 2002, and this is near Mitteltal, Germany. This is the Black Forest.
Mm-hmm.
Big tradition
Oh,
of beings in the Black
oh,
Forest of Germany.
everyth's in the Black Forest. Yes.
Oh, elves, the souls of sleeping trees. I love
I
that.
love that. I love that. Yeah, I had to put that out.
That's very cool. So this guy, they know his name, Harmut Schultz,
Mhm,
is taking a Sunday drive with his girlfriend and an acquaintance who's in the back seat.
mhm,
And it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're on their way back to their village.
mhm,
And this is just just a short distance away from the village.
mhm,
There's a lot of lumber going on there in terms of chopping down trees and stuff. That's the economy of that place.
mhm,
And so he's driving by on the highway this big pile of sort of lumber
mhm,
and looks out the window of his car and clearly sees an elf. What he
mhm,
describes as an elf on this pile of newly sawed wood right
mhm,
next to the road.
mhm.
The wood pile's 5 feet high, right? And the elf is sitting on top of it leisurely, enjoying like a sunbathing, and is smoking a pipe.
Mhm.
This is the part that is really interesting to me, is because you see this in Bilbo Baggins or whatever.
Yes, it's
The
true.
Hobbit,
Yes.
smoking
Yes.
smoking pipe.
Yes.
Didn't say
Yes.
what they were smoking.
Right.
I don't know.
We can speculate, but okay. Yes.
We'll assume it's tobacco, but who knows? It's an elf. He can smoke what he wants. But
Magical
wearing
little beings.
brown
Yeah.
clothes, hat on
Yes.
his head,
Right.
and it's watching the cars go by, and apparently has no fear of being seen.
Oh.
But the witness has the impression that nobody can see him because this guy is like just staring there as if nobody can see him.
Mhm.
So as he's passing by him, he can see this elf and stares at him in surprise. And the elf locks gazes with him and
You
seems
can see
absolutely
me?
surprised and delighted that
Yes.
that they can see each other.
Mhm.
And so jumps up and springs to his feet in joy and starts running alongside the car. The car's booking along pretty fast.
Yes. Yes.
And
It's like
could only keep up with the car for just a short distance. But
mhm.
this guy, Mr. Schultz, Helmut Schultz, had this distinct impression that the elf was very interested in him, in humans, and wanted to interact.
So it leads me back to the theory. Do you think it's just certain people that are meant to see them?
I don't know. The girlfriend saw it.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
saw him too. The guy in the
Mhm.
back did not see it.
Yeah, see?
But now this guy does admit he's had a number of really psychic experiences.
Okay.
So
Well, that would explain, you
yeah,
can either see or you can't see. So, but to say that even that the little guy thought nobody could see him and
yeah,
almost looked surprised that these two could see him.
right.
So, maybe that's just again, leads
So I
just to
think it's
think you
kind
have
of
to go at a certain frequency and vibration to be able
yeah,
to maybe drive with theirs.
it's like a medium. I talked to a
Mhm.
medium who's a contactee, She says, when I see ghosts, I see them as fully formed people. Sometimes I don't even know that they're a ghost. So this could be what's happening. They're essentially already in the fourth dimension.
Yes.
Most people can't see them. But if you have that ability, you can see them. Could be why Dolly, was able to see this little fairy.
Yes.
She described the clothes in detail too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her account was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds more like a fairy than else because there was the little wings.
Yeah, sounds like a fairy for sure. It does.
It's so interesting, because gosh, I'm convinced people are seeing these. So they are real. There's too many reports. I mean, in Europe, there's a little elf museum where they collect all these reports. There are books that focus solely on this. And yeah,
it's a very, very big part of their culture. A lot of these countries,
100%.
If you get into the old Norse cultures and the stories and the folklore, this is just like an everyday occurrence, like to the point where when you have a country who's going to reroute an entire highway because of gnomes, this is a very rich part of their culture. Many of these people grew up hearing this, and so did their parents, grandparents. So for somebody to do that, to me, is just like, you have to have a strong belief. That does get carried forward. Only so many stories can be told. You can't shrug it all off. We need to be more open-minded. And it's like I said, if you're vibrating at a certain frequency, which is not hard to do through meditation, just listen to binaural beats, just like tap into that while you're just relaxing. If you find it hard to ground yourself enough to meditate, or like you say, have an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of developing your psychic ability,
yes,
increasing your awareness, your consciousness, and doing what you can, because we do have the ability to see these things, and they are there. And here's the thing, it's the skepticism and ridicule surrounding these subjects that keeps most people from talking. So this is just the very tip of the iceberg. Guaranteed people are seeing this right now all over the world. I'm not talking about it because who are you going to tell? And not feel like a complete,
But that's a big part of it. It's like I was saying on the show last week, when I was doing a ghost tour, historical walking tour, ghost tour. There was a tree there, and we had about 50 people on this tour. And it's a huge shrub. I mean, it's just massive thing, and the whole thing lit up like little white Christmas lights.
Oh wow!
And we're like, come on! People were snapping pictures, examining this shrub. Like, are there lights in here? Maybe, somebody's in the house going, put the lights on. Like, what's going on with it? And there was nothing. And they stayed on for just a few seconds, and it was like the whole tree. I'm like, please send me pictures. Please send me pictures. Nobody sent pictures. I don't understand why people don't want to send pictures. It's crazy, because people were snapping photos like crazy. And I ended up talking to the owner about it. And she goes, because when we did this tour, it was with permission from people's properties. We didn't go to private residences to protect the properties afterwards, right? But she goes, it's never done that. So I don't know. How do you explain that?
I don't know.
The people there was like,
souls of the tree.
The souls of the tree. Yeah, we had one woman who was all about fairies. She goes, oh no, this is like fairy energy. It's like, I never seen it in like all the 10, 15 years of doing that tour. I'd never seen anything like that in that area. So I do believe that things are coming forward. People are just afraid to talk about it. But then if you look, you go up in a home where they're like, oh, we just don't talk about things like that. When you're young, and that's how you're conditioned, people are going to think, that there's something wrong with you if you talk about things like that. Whether it would be ghosts or aliens,
which is so stupid, because it's actually something right about you. It's something
I know
about you.
To show you how backwards things were. I was so grateful to grow up in a family of mediums who would just basically say, "No, it's okay. This is normal," And I'm like, "Okay." But my mother did say, "You just might not want to go, talking to too many people about it because they might not understand." I'm like, "What do you mean not understand? Not everybody gets to do this." Apparently not. So, but it's cool. So do you have any more stories before we?
Yeah, if we have
Okay.
time for another one, here's a really good
Sure,
one.
we do. Let's go
Um,
crazy. I know
June.
the manager.
Awesome. June
Okay.
24th, 2003, Rough
Okay.
River State Park in Kentucky,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is, if you look this up, it's a beautiful area, lots of water, lots of wilderness. This is
Okay.
afternoon, and a witness is going canoeing in a very remote area, but has a strange feeling of being watched. Kind of, there's a strange feeling going on. And this sometimes precedes encounters of all different kinds, whether it's a ghost or a UFO or what have you, Bigfoot,
Mm-hmm.
being watched. So he's
Yes.
got that extrasensory perception going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's being very cautious because he's on a canoe in a remote area. And going down
Yeah.
to explore this beautiful area, he looks and sees what looks like a clay jar kind of sticking out of the sand. He thought, oh, this is interesting. Maybe this is some sort of archaeological artifact or something. And so he's going towards it. And as he's getting to it, he sees there's little handprints on it. He thought, could these be raccoon prints? But they look like little human handprints, each about an inch wide, tiny little things. So he's trying to pry it loose, right, and get this thing, when he hears this noise that sounds like kids laughing, coming down from the creek some yards away, pulls this little crock jar out of the mud and hears this screaming noise. Sounds like a little girl, but very high pitched, very loud. So he's like freaking out, grabs the jar, scrambling up the muddy bank, glances back and trying to, he's looking at the jar, like wondering about these handprints, right? And looks over the bank and he sees these two little people and they are 10 inches tall. I love this. Can you imagine seeing a person who's a foot tall that's fully formed? I mean, it's one thing to see,
yeah.
a 3 foot tall, but
It would be so bizarre. Yeah.
pale
Yeah.
skin, little brown leather pants held up by suspenders, no shirts. They're chest, they're bare chested.
I'm sorry, I've seen that in cartoons. Like that's crazy.
Pointy little
Wow.
hats made what looked like leather foot coverings that went up past the ankle, red hair, blue eyes. So this is a kind of Irish Scandinavian
I was
sort
gonna
of
say a little Irish dude. Yeah. Wow.
and hands, yep, inch wide hands.
Yes.
And he was watching them and they saw him watching them, but they were very busy doing some sort of task, which was pulling this stump out of the mud. And they were going to do it. And they were working hard to pull this stump. They had little ropes, which looked almost like strings to him because they were tiny little people. And
Right.
actually quite clean for being in the mud. He noticed that, which was unusual.
That's a monumental feat.
Yeah. And so he's looking around and he sees a couple more of them and saw that they had taken his crock jar and pushed it back down the bank. And they were all laughing at him in high-pitched laughter. I've heard a couple of people describe this. They're walking along and they hear laughter. Someone wrote to me about this. Nobody's around, but they can hear something laughing around them. So
that's
sometimes
crazy.
I think they can be invisible. So they were acting like a bunch of kids. Then you heard this loud snapping noise. All gone. Disappeared. Boom. But footprints plainly visible in the mud. And the crock jar was gone too.
That's insane.
And the stump that they were taking. So they dragged that into their fourth dimension, I'm guessing. I don't know.
So here we go. Where we were talking about being able to just take things right into the realm from ours. A tree stump, no less. Interesting.
Yeah.
God, I love it. I love it. I wish we had like another hour, but we do have time if you want to do one more story.
All right, here's the most recent one I've got.
Okay.
Grand Rapids, Michigan, all over the world here, right? April 5th, 2011, 3 a.m., the guy lets his dog Buster out and standing in the doorway waiting for Buster to do his business. This little figure run across the neighbor's yard. And this figure is 3.5 feet tall and looks almost like it's got greenish skin.
Oh, boy.
Big eyes, prominent head, normal proportioned arms and legs. and it stops about 60 feet away and looks back at the witness and his dog. Both, of course, are staring back. And the witness looked away because he thought he heard or saw something, looks back, and it's gone. This was reported to the National UFO Reporting Center. And I thought it was interesting because while this could be a UFO entity, there was no UFO. So I don't know.
But they can come through portals as well, right?
I mean, if that's what you want to call it, I don't know. I think that they can go from one.
It's a stretch, but I'm going there. Yeah.
I mean, the terminology. We need to find out what's going on here. I do think that they're slipping between dimensions.
Yes.
A dimensional doorway, maybe.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. It's very hard. But I had a lot of people, tell me, I'm so glad you're putting this stuff out, because I had this experience too.
Yes.
So one lady, she said she saw a row of dwarfs. She was 6 years old.
Oh, you should email me on your own, because this is getting boring. So just email me on your own if you have questions. I don't put everything out in the public, and I'm not a circus show, so I'll leave it there. So honestly, okay. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, well, this lady saw dwarves walking by. She reached out and touched one, and it went and hissed at her. Had big, sharp teeth on both sides. So they're not always, super friendly and smile.
Well, no, because it's almost like having like gremlins. Like sometimes that they like to take things and hide things, and sometimes you have to ask them nicely and say, okay, can you please put it back? I mean, Wayne's had all kinds of those experiences, and they just come back. So they can be mischievous. It can be aggressive. The teeth thing is a little bit of a concern.
So she followed them, and they were jumping into this weird little kind of interdimensional hole in the ground. Yeah. So she sticks her head into it, and it's another place.
Yes.
And she hears this voice, this woman's voice, telepathically in her head, that says, "If you come in, you can't come back." So she decides to pull her head out, and this thing immediately shut. But this kind of speaks towards, the fairy lore going back, where people disappear, the Rip Van Winkle kind of thing. They're off, and then they come back, and years have passed. It's kind of got that weird parallel to some UFO encounters, but it's still different. I'm not going to conflate these two together. I don't think they're the same. I really don't.
No, I would agree with you on that. I think there's all kinds of, like I say, all kinds of things out there that we need to keep an open mind with. And there just seems to be a whole realm of different things. And I think we do see it a lot in films, Lord of the Rings being another really good one. Even, for more modern day people, educating people a little bit on at least being open-minded about it. Harry Potter's a good one for the next generation. Who doesn't love Dobby? Come on. Poor little house elf. Everybody loves Dobby, But no, I think that keep our eyes open, keep your mind open is the most important. I think when again, there are people all over the place who see these things. There are people who see through remote viewing. I can't tell you how many stories I hear. So if you can have an out-of-body experience, and if you can remote view, check it out that way. They're definitely around.
Yeah.
They're definitely around.
I'm putting it on my bucket list, because I've always got a bunch of things to do when you go out of body, which anyone can do. I say this every time I'm on the radio, because we're on a podcast. If you want to learn how to go out of body, email me, and I will send you a little booklet. Preston.
Yes.
UFO@gmail.com. I will send you my little OBE guide.
Yes.
You can do this.
And I'm just going to put your website up here as well.
Oh, thank you.
So people can find you, and all you have all of your information is in the write-up of the show, so people can go out and find you there as well. And Preston would as you can see, makes an awesome guest, and I'm just so pleased to have you as my friend. You and Dolly are so near and dear to me, and I love having you both come on. I love your stories. I love sharing how you just share it all with everyone. And of course, 2025, I know there's going to be more books coming. So
I'm working on them. I've got another OBE book, working on Symmetry 2. That's the next one.
That'll be the big one, won't it?
I do want to give a shout out to Galen Sharp. His story is in my book Humanoids and High Strangeness, the elf story that I told earlier. So because there's more detail to it, you can never get all the information out in a little podcast. But
no,
thanks.
You have so many books. I don't know where you find the time, but I'm grateful that you do find the time and that you do put them out there, because they show a much lighter side. For anybody who hasn't checked out Preston's books, you should, because it really does show a lighter side to being an experiencer and having some of this contact, which, I've had forever and repressed a lot of it because I just wasn't comfortable with it. So I think as you go along, become comfortable. Right. He wants your email again. Yeah, it's PrestonUFO@gmail.com. My first name and the word UFO. Super easy to remember. And please email me and I will guide you through having an out-of-body experience. I'll send you the little guide, and certainly you can email me and we'll get you going, because it's so worth it. It's so much fun. I mean, the things you can do, meeting deceased loved ones and going to healing temples and enlightened masters and learning past lives. And it's crazy. It's so worth it. And I think you take away the stigma with it, because there's a lot of stigma attached to some of that, a lot of fear put into that, probably just trying to discourage people from wanting to do it. I used to have an aunt who used to say, "Oh my God, don't do it. You'll get your astral ties cut and you won't be able to come back."
You're already doing it every night, just so you know.
That's true.
I'm already doing it.
Exactly. Well, okay. So aside from the books, you have anything else coming up that you want to throw out there?
No, not really. Just thanks for having me on the show. I truly appreciate it. Love you very much. I know Dolly does too. She says hi.
I know. I love you guys both too. Thank you. Thank you. Well, guys, and we're going to sign it off. So big thank you to Preston Dennett for coming on and talking about elves. Yes, I believe in elves. So I'm sorry if I roll my eyes too much. I'm animated. I'm French. What can I say?
Well, Dolly reminds me to let everyone know about the Light Gate.
Yes.
That we have our own little podcast Monday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern, or let me correct myself, 8 p.m.
8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. No, you're 8 p.m. Eastern.
Right. 8 to 10 p.m.
You are.
Yeah, that's right.
You are.
8 to 10 p.m. Eastern.
Yes, you are.
Promise.
Yes, you are.
It's Monday evening. Yeah, we're having a great time. Thanks to you, Michelle.
Oh, my God. Are you kidding?
You who gave us that opportunity, and I can't thank you enough.
Oh, my God. We love you, and your shows are just doing phenomenal. Guys, check them out, because I know we have a lot of people like talking UFOs and disclosure and you name it. That's the show to check out. Let's do that. And if you're lucky on a Wednesday night, catch UFO Undercover. Get a little bit more with Joe Montaldo. So big thank you to Preston Dennett. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring tonight's show and every night show. Thank you to Justin Snicker and to Steve McGinnis. Tomorrow night, we're going to go off on a little bit of a different topic with Dr. Rita Louise, who returns talking about her film Icon, which essentially is a deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients' deceit, lies, and deception, reptilian agenda, the truth about the Nephilim, ancient aliens, genetic engineering, and the rise of civilization. So that'll be some nice, bedtime listening. But Dr. Rita is a hoot. She's a lot of fun, and she's definitely well-researched and well-versed as well. So come on out and check us out. We appreciate you. And we shall see you guys tomorrow evening. Good night.